Now, in a number of studies, we can talk a little bit, and what I want to talk about a little bit with you is what we refer to as the dynamics of intelligence. And what that includes is what happens, for example, as we age. In most, what we refer to as cross-sectional studies, researchers at one point in time test and compare people of various ages, and then we look at and compare them against other ages and look at what happens with intelligence. And basically what we have found is that intelligence declines with age. So the basic understanding is that declines with age. And that doesn't necessarily mean somebody becomes dumber. That doesn't mean that at all. We find that essentially intelligence stabilizes over time, but in terms of processing speed, for example, when we look at people over time, so when we do a cross-sectional study, we look at the term suggests. We take a slice of people during that time and make some comparisons between those ages. On the other hand, longitudinal studies looks at they follow people over time and look at what happens. And essentially, it isn't really until late in life that intelligence actually changes. The problem with some of the longitudinal studies is that some of the downside of these studies is that you lose people over time, and people die off, and that's very much a part of it. So essentially with these longitudinal studies, it found that until late in life, basically intelligence remained relatively stable. Now, there are two key things that we found out as we followed people throughout life. There were two different kinds of intelligence. One was what we refer to as crystallized intelligence. And as a result of these studies, the whole idea of crystallized intelligence is really accumulated knowledge. And so it tends to be very stable over time, because once the person has accumulated this knowledge, they don't tend to lose it very much. And so oftentimes we might talk about wisdom as being one of these characteristics of crystallized intelligence. And as a matter of fact, oftentimes this increases with age. Now, there's another kind of intelligence we often talk about, and that's fluid intelligence. In fluid intelligence, this is something entirely different. We're talking about our ability to reason with speed and with accuracy. So what we're talking about here is ability to reason with speed. If you remember, the C with the line over it is my shorthand for with speed, and to reason abstractly. So abstraction, sorry about that, abstractive abilities, let's put it that way. And what we find is it usually peaks in the 20s and 30s. So it hits its highest in 20s and 30s, and then as time progresses, it decreases at a slower rate into later adulthood. And so the stability of intelligence test scores increases with age. By age 4, children's performance tends to predict their adolescent and adult scores, and by late adolescence, these intelligence scores tend to stay relatively fixed. So what I want you to notice in this particular diagram I have up here is, if you remember with correlation, there rarely is a 1.0 correlation, but what you'll notice is with advancing age, the IQ at age 11 and the IQ at 80 years of age, way up here, is that when somebody has, say, a 120 IQ at age 11, and where it is at the 80 years of age, it's very similar in it's correlational. There's a high degree of correlation or relationship between what you have when you start at 11 years of age and what you have at the end of life at 80 years of age. And so this is this plot or scattergram that we're accustomed to seeing shows you what the trend line is the higher the level of intelligence you have at 11 is usually maintained all the way through life.